The subtle movement of the curtain revealed her face watching my house for the third time that week. She quickly disappeared when our eyes met. 52 years of life taught me to know when something wasn't right, and that woman was definitely not just admiring my new purchase. The Victorian house at 47 Magnolia Street was exactly what I had been looking for after 30 years of restoring old furniture. The property needed some care, but its original lines, colorful stained glass, and pristine hardwood made my restoration-loving heart beat faster. Finally, I would have my own studio in a historic neighborhood where I could work in peace. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like to get access to more stories like this. That March morning, as I was unloading my tools from the truck, I felt that unique satisfaction of someone finally realizing a long-planned dream. The sun filtered through the centuries-old trees lining the street, creating stunning light patterns on the original floor that I already imagined restored. The distinct smell of old wood mixed with the scent of blossoming magnolias confirmed it. This was my place. "Mr. Anderson, right?" The voice startled me. I turned to see a woman of about 60, her hair perfectly styled and posture as straight as a ruler. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "I'm Susan Roberts, president of the Neighborhood Preservation Association. I came by personally to welcome you and talk about some important details." I extended my hand, which she shook briefly. "Nice to meet you. You can call me James." "Well, Mr. Anderson, everyone here on Magnolia Street takes great pride in the historical authenticity of our homes. We have certain traditions and standards we follow." Something about the way she said "standards" bothered me. Of course, I did my research on the municipal building code. This house isn't in a historic preservation zone, but I plan to keep its original features. Her smile hardened. "I'm not just talking about the official regulations, Mr. Anderson. Our association sets additional guidelines that everyone follows. I'll drop by later with our manual." "Sorry, but from what I've researched, there isn't a formally registered neighborhood association in this area." Her gaze turned icy. "We've been around for over 30 years, Mr. Anderson. Perhaps your research wasn't as thorough as you thought." I kept my tone polite. "I appreciate your visit, Mrs. Roberts, but I intend to follow only the municipality's official regulations." She adjusted the bag on her shoulder. "Everyone says that at first. You'll soon understand how things work around here." In the following weeks, I started restoring the main hall's floor. One night, while I was carefully sanding a pine board, I heard a noise on the porch. Through the window, I caught sight of Susan photographing my house. When I opened the door, she was already hurrying across the street. The next morning, as I went out to buy materials, I found an envelope in my mailbox. Inside was a friendly notice about the inappropriateness of the color I had chosen to restore the window frames, which ironically was the original color, as proven by some fragments still intact. 3 days later, I woke up to the sound of a metal clanging on the front door's lock. As I quietly went down the stairs, I saw through the curtain a female silhouette trying to use a key on my door. When I turned on the porch light, Susan pretended to be leaving a flyer and quickly walked away. The next morning, I called a locksmith and changed all the locks. I also installed motion sensor lights and a discreet camera at the front entrance. I'm not naturally paranoid, but 30 years of restoring antiques taught me to appreciate security. The doorbell rang as I was waxing the dining table I had just restored. 2 uniformed men were waiting on the porch, one of them holding a clipboard. "Mr. Anderson, Municipal Inspection Department. We received a report about possible unauthorized structural changes." Through the window, I saw Susan watching from the sidewalk out front. "May I see the inspection warrant, please?" The inspectors exchanged looks. "Actually, we're just doing preliminary visits. The complaint mentioned an imminent risk. Without an official warrant, I can't allow you to enter. All the restorations I do preserve the original structure and follow the municipal code." They seemed relieved by my polite response, promising to return if necessary. They never came back. I opened the refrigerator door and was met by a nauseating odor that made me step back immediately. The entire interior was coated with a sticky brown layer, and little flies buzzed around the shelves. In the vegetable compartment, I found the source: a package of ground beef in an advanced stage of decay, which definitely wasn't there when I left that morning. The windows were intact, and the lock showed no signs of being broken. Someone with access to my house had done it deliberately. Breathing through my mouth, I took pictures before beginning the cleanup. Even after 2 hours of using strong chemicals, the smell lingered, embedded in the white plastic. The next morning, the discovery in the backyard confirmed my suspicions. Among my carefully organized gardening tools, I found 3 more packages of rotten meat, strategically scattered near the vent entrances. On the security cameras, there was only a blurry figure crossing the garden at 3:42 a.m. I'm not imagining things, I murmured as I cataloged the photos in a digital folder I labeled Incidents. I spent the day installing more cameras, now covering all angles of the property. That week, when a delivery guy left a fifth big box on my porch, he seemed embarrassed. "Mr. Anderson, sorry, but we need to talk about these deliveries." I signed the receipt mechanically. I didn't order any of these. That's what I thought. All these orders are different, but they all arrive on the same day with your name and address. The system shows valid payments, but I opened the last box. A complete set of indoor plant growing equipment, including high-powered lamps and ventilation systems. The others contained an industrial heater, 15 meters of heavy-duty rubber hose, 20 kilos of concentrated fertilizer, and a set of veterinary surgical tools. "Someone's trying to create the impression of suspicious activity," I explained to the delivery man, showing him the absurdity of these purchases. "Can I see the details of who ordered these?" "Unfortunately, we only have your name and address. The payments were made with prepaid cards." I added the invoices to my evidence folder. It was clear that Susan was stepping up her tactics, trying to paint me as a suspicious person in the eyes of the neighbors and authorities. 3 days later, I found my mailbox overflowing. Among the usual bills were dozens of letters from government agencies, associations, and services I'd never contacted. Flyers about substance abuse, rehab, information on sexually transmitted diseases, offender monitoring programs, support groups for pyromaniacs, and informational material about gun regulations. My first reaction was disbelief, then anger, and finally, cold determination. I documented everything methodically. I took pictures, organized them by date, and noted patterns. The goal was clear: to intimidate me into either giving up on the house or submitting to Susan's unspoken rules. One morning, I woke up in total darkness. No devices were working. The power had been cut. I called the electric company on my cell phone. "Mr. Anderson, our records show that a disconnection request was made by the owner yesterday afternoon," the operator explained. "I'm the owner, and I definitely didn't request that." After verifying my identity, the employee seemed confused. "Someone came in person to our office, presented documents in your name, and requested the disconnection citing structural renovations. And you didn't check that person's identity? The documents looked authentic, sir. We'll send a team immediately to restore your service and investigate the incident." While I waited, I began planning my next move. Susan had crossed a significant line. Forgery and disruption of essential services were crimes. She wasn't just an annoying neighbor anymore. She was someone willing to commit illegal acts to force me out. The electric company's team arrived quickly. While they worked to restore the power, I saw Susan casually walking on the front sidewalk, watching the technicians with apparent curiosity. Our eyes met shortly, and she smiled. Not a social smile, but one that showed she was enjoying the unfolding of her plan. That afternoon, I reviewed all the evidence I had collected. Photos, videos, communications, receipts, and statements from delivery men and technicians. It was time to go to the authorities. At the local police station, Sergeant Davis treated me with professional courtesy, but I sensed his growing skepticism as I recounted the events. "Mr. Anderson, I understand your concern, but we need concrete evidence to take action. Difficult neighbors are everywhere." "I'm not just talking about a difficult neighbor, Sergeant. We're dealing with property invasion, document forgery, aggravated harassment, and systematic intimidation." I showed him the security camera footage, the fraudulent letters, and the records of unsolicited deliveries. His interest visibly grew when I presented the evidence of document forgery with the electric company. "I'm going to file a report and forward this to Detective Morales. In the meantime, keep documenting everything. If this lady is really behind all this, she's bound to slip up eventually." I left the station with mixed emotions. Relief at being heard, but frustration at the cautious response. I understood the officer's position. Without a clear-cut incident or a confession, it was hard to prove who was responsible. The next morning, I found an official notice on my door. A formal complaint had been filed against me for persistent nighttime disturbance. Supposedly, I was doing loud carpentry work in the early hours, preventing the neighbors from sleeping. The signature on the complaint was Susan Roberts, who was requesting immediate police intervention. The absurdity of the situation almost made me laugh. I was meticulous about work hours, never using noisy tools after 6 in the evening. To my surprise, that same afternoon a patrol car pulled up in front of my house. 2 officers, different from the ones I had called the day before, asked for my ID, and questioned me about the nighttime activities. "Officers, I can prove that these accusations are false," I replied calmly, inviting them inside. "I have security cameras recording 24/7 activity on the property. Plus, my energy meter shows minimal consumption at night, which doesn't match the use of electric tools." I showed them the records from the last 2 weeks. One officer, the older one, frowned. "Mr. Anderson, this isn't the first complaint of this kind we've received in this neighborhood. They usually involve new residents and the same complainant." His younger colleague looked uncomfortable but nodded. "We'll check your records and file this complaint. It appears you're a victim of, let's say, a complicated neighborhood dynamic." After they left, I watched Susan through the window. She was standing by the fence that separated our properties, phone in hand, clearly upset by the outcome of the police visit. When she noticed my stare, she abruptly hung up and went inside her house. The silence that followed in the next few days was even more disturbing than the previous provocations. I continued my restoration work, ever vigilant, documenting my daily routine even in the absence of new incidents. Something told me that the calm was only temporary. On the 4th night without any incidents, at 10:15 p.m., my security system sent an alert to my cell phone. 2 figures were crossing my garden, approaching the side entrance. They weren't just vague shapes this time. The high-definition cameras I had installed clearly captured 2 men, one of them carrying what looked like a crowbar. I called the police immediately to report an ongoing invasion. Then I activated the external lights using remote control, flooding the garden with brightness. The intruders hesitated for a moment, looking around, confused. On the monitor, I saw Susan emerging from the street shadows, frantically gesturing toward the men. She pointed at my window, apparently giving instructions. One of the men, taller and bulkier, advanced toward the back door despite the lighting, while the other seemed to be arguing with Susan. "I have video of suspicious movement," I told the 911 operator. "Mrs. Roberts is clearly coordinating 2 men attempting to break into my property. I'm alone in the house." Sirens sounded in the distance. Susan and the men realized this at the same time, sparking a brief argument between them before they separated. The men running toward a car parked on the corner, and Susan quickly heading back to her house. 2 minutes later, 2 patrol cars pulled up in front of my house. I met the officers on the porch, holding my tablet with the video evidence ready to show. "Mr. Anderson, I'm Detective Morales. Sergeant Davis forwarded your case to me yesterday. It seems we had a major development tonight." "I've got everything recorded," I replied, showing him the clear footage of Susan coordinating the 2 intruders on my property. The detective studied the footage carefully, making notes. "Can you identify these individuals?" "I've never seen them before, but I clearly recognize Susan Roberts. She's giving them instructions." Morales nodded gravely. "We're going to need these videos and any other evidence you've got. Based on the history you reported and this footage, we have enough to launch a formal investigation." While we were talking, I noticed movement at Susan's house, curtains sliding open discreetly, then closing quickly when she realized we were watching. "She's watching," I commented. "Let her watch," Morales replied. "Now we have something concrete. We know one of those men, Thompson, who has previous charges for home invasion and assault. His connection with Mrs. Roberts is interesting, to say the least." That night, while Detective Morales and his team collected evidence and took statements from neighbors, I felt that the scales were finally tipping in my favor. Patience and meticulous documentation had proven more effective than any direct confrontation might have been. The next morning, I watched from my window as 2 officers approached Susan's house. The expression on her face when she opened the door, first outrage, then disbelief, and finally something close to fear, confirmed what I had long suspected. She never imagined her campaign of intimidation would meet with any real resistance. The courtroom was silent as Judge Morgan delivered the sentence. Susan Roberts, impeccably dressed in a navy blue suit, maintained the same stiff posture she had shown during our first encounter. But her eyes, once so commanding, now avoided direct contact with anyone. In light of the evidence presented, and considering the gravity of the crimes, this court sentences the defendant, Susan Roberts, to 3 years in prison for conspiracy to commit home invasion, document forgery, aggravated harassment, and owner intimidation. The judge adjusted his glasses, looking directly at Susan. The systematic and calculated nature of these actions, as well as the recruitment of individuals with criminal records to intimidate Mr. Anderson, clearly demonstrates premeditation and a complete disregard for the law. I sat there, watching Susan as the bailiff came to escort her out. Our eyes met briefly. There was no hatred in mine, only the quiet determination of someone who had defended his right to peace. Prosecutor Jenkins then approached me. "Mr. Anderson, we rarely see cases as well documented as yours. Your meticulous record-keeping was crucial." "I just did what I felt was necessary," I replied. "I never wanted it to come to this." "We uncovered more than we expected during the investigation," Jenkins continued in a low voice. "Ms. Roberts has a history of similar behavior with other homeowners. 2 of them ended up moving out after months of harassment. One previous case was dropped due to lack of evidence. That information, though not surprising, filled me with sadness. How many people had abandoned their dreams, their homes, because they couldn't stand up to her systematic pressure? The neighbors started talking," the prosecutor added. "Now that the conviction is official, reports of years of controlling behavior, disguised as neighborhood preservation, are surfacing. Apparently, she used that fake association to impose her personal preferences on everything, from facade colors to what kind of plants people could grow in their own gardens." On the way out of the courtroom, I noticed a small group of people waiting. I recognized some faces from the neighborhood, neighbors who had only given me distant nods during my first months there. An elderly lady with gray hair timidly approached. "Mr. Anderson? I'm Martha Fletcher. I live 2 houses down from you." She extended a trembling hand. "I wanted to thank you personally for what you did. Many of us, we had been living in fear of Susan for years." "Why didn't anyone confront her sooner?" I asked, genuinely curious. Martha looked away, embarrassed. "It started so subtly. Small suggestions, then more pointed comments. Before we knew it, she had created a system where any deviation from the rules brought consequences. My husband tried to resist when she demanded we cut down our century-old magnolia because it blocked the historic view of the street. 2 weeks later, inspectors visited us. Our car was vandalized, and rumors about my husband's mental health started circulating. A younger man stepped up. "I'm Robert Callahan, from the corner house. When I moved here 5 years ago, Susan organized a welcome committee that was basically an orientation on how I was supposed to behave. When I questioned it, I found my dog accidentally let loose on the street the very next day, with the gate left open. Then came anonymous letters to my employer suggesting inappropriate behavior. Others joined in, sharing similar stories that painted a disturbing picture of manipulation and control. It was as if a dam had burst. People who had lived under oppression for years were finally finding their voice." "How did you let this go on for so long?" I asked. Not accusatory, but simply trying to understand. A gentleman of about 70 replied, "Individually, each incident seemed manageable, maybe even coincidental. Collectively, they formed a pattern that we all recognized, but no one could prove. Susan was meticulous in keeping her actions just within the limits of legality, or at least within the limits of detection. And there was always the fear of being the next target if you spoke up." On my way home, I reflected on those testimonies. Susan's house, with its closed curtains, now looked different. Not a fortress of authority, but just an empty residence that soon would have a new owner. The realtor had already placed a "for sale" sign in the meticulously maintained garden. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like to get access to more stories like this. The Victorian house at 47 Magnolia Street had finally become what I had always dreamed of. Not just a restoration project, but a true home within a real community. The invisible scars left by Susan Roberts' reign were slowly healing, replaced by new connections based on choice rather than coercion.